I was sitting in my office, staring out the window at the bustling city below. My name's Olivia, and I'm a 33-year-old marketing manager. I've been married to Jack, a corporate lawyer, for 8 years now. We've got it all: a beautiful home, great careers, and a circle of friends who think we're living the dream. I remember the day I met Jack like it was yesterday. I was at a charity gala, feeling out of place in my rented dress, when he walked up and offered me a glass of champagne. "You look like you could use this," he said with a wink. We talked all night, and by the end of it, I knew he was something special. Fast forward 8 years, and we're still going strong. Or so I thought. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, Jack and me on our honeymoon, grinning like fools on a beach in Bali. God, we were so happy then. Just last week, we hosted a dinner party for some of Jack's colleagues. I spent hours preparing a gourmet meal, and Jack was the perfect host, charming everyone with his wit and stories. As we waved goodbye to the last guest, he pulled me close and whispered, "You're amazing. You know that?" I felt on top of the world. Our life together isn't perfect, but whose is? Sure, Jack's been working late a lot lately, but that's just because he's dedicated to his job. He's always been ambitious, and I admire that about him. Sometimes I wish we had more time together, but I understand the demands of his career. Speaking of work, I should probably focus on this marketing campaign I'm supposed to be planning, but my mind keeps drifting back to Jack. I wonder what he's up to right now. Probably buried in legal briefs, poor thing. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, I did something pretty cool last month. There's this women's shelter in our neighborhood that's been struggling to stay afloat. I organized a fundraiser at work, and we managed to raise enough money to keep their doors open for another year. Jack was so proud when I told him. He even suggested we make it an annual event. You know, thinking about it now, I realize how lucky I am. I've got a successful career, a beautiful home, and a husband who supports me in everything I do. Sure, we have our ups and downs like any couple, but at the end of the day, I know Jack's got my back. I glance at the clock and realize it's almost time to head home. I should pick up some groceries on the way. Maybe I'll surprise Jack with his favorite meal tonight. He's been working so hard lately. He deserves a treat. As I pack up my things, I can't help but smile. Life's pretty good, you know. I mean, who wouldn't want a handsome, successful husband and a life that looks perfect from the outside? I've got it all, and I'm grateful for every bit of it. Little did I know, my perfect world was about to come crashing down around me. But hey, that's a story for another time. Right now, I'm just Olivia, happily married and on top of the world. And that's exactly how I like it. I thought everything in my life was perfect. But looking back, I can see the cracks starting to form. It all began on a Tuesday night. I'd planned a romantic dinner for Jack and me, his favorite lasagna, a bottle of red wine, candles on the table, the works. I was so excited to spend some quality time together. 7 o'clock came and went. No Jack. I sent him a text. "Dinner's ready. You on your way." No response. By 8, the lasagna was cold, and I was picking at it alone, trying not to feel disappointed. When Jack finally walked in at 9, he looked surprised to see me still at the dining table. "Oh, babe, I'm so sorry," he said, running a hand through his hair. "This big case we're working on." I lost track of time. I wanted to be understanding, I really did, but something about the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes made me uneasy. "It's okay," I said, forcing a smile. "I know how busy you are." That night was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing little things. Jack was always on his phone, but he'd turn the screen away when I walked by. He started taking calls in another room, speaking in hushed tones. When I asked who it was, he'd just say work and change the subject. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find Jack's side of the bed empty. I found him in the living room, furiously typing on his laptop. "Just finishing up some briefs," he said when he saw me. But why did he close the laptop so quickly when I came closer? I tried to push these thoughts away. Jack was dedicated to his job, that's all. but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Then came the night of our friend Sarah's birthday party. Jack had promised he'd be there, but an hour into the party, he was still a no-show. I called him, and he answered in a whisper. "Sorry, Liv. I can't make it. This case is really heating up." I could hear voices in the background, clinking glasses. It didn't sound like an office. "Where are you?" I asked, my heart pounding. "At the office, of course," he said, a bit too quickly. "Listen, I've got to go. I'll make it up to you, I promise." As I hung up, Sarah came over and put her arm around me. "Jack working late again?" she asked sympathetically. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "You know," Sarah said, lowering her voice. "My cousin went through something similar with her husband. Turned out he was—" She stopped herself, looking embarrassed. "Never mind. I'm sure it's nothing like that with Jack." But the seed was planted. That night, I lay awake long after Jack came home, pretending to be asleep. My mind was racing. Was Jack really working late all these nights? Or was there someone else? The next morning, I decided to surprise Jack at his office with lunch. I told myself it was just to be supportive, to show him I understood how hard he was working. But deep down, I knew I was looking for something, anything to prove my suspicions wrong. When I got to his office, his secretary looked surprised to see me. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," she said, flustered. "I thought you were having lunch with Mr. Thompson today." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "He left about an hour ago," she said. "Said he was meeting you for lunch." I mumbled something about a miscommunication and left, my uneaten lunch feeling like a lead weight in my hand. Where was Jack? Who was he with? As I walked back to my car, I saw a text from Jack pop up on my phone. "Working through lunch today, babe. Don't wait up tonight. Big presentation tomorrow." I stared at the message, my vision blurring with unshed tears. It was just a misunderstanding, right? There had to be a reasonable explanation. Jack loved me. He wouldn't lie to me, would he? I spent the rest of the day in a daze, unable to focus on work. That night, I lay awake again, listening to Jack's steady breathing beside me. I wanted so badly to shake him awake, to demand answers. But I was afraid of what I might find out if I started digging. So I did what I'd been doing for weeks now. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and told myself everything was fine. Jack loved me. Our marriage was strong. These suspicions were just my imagination running wild. But as I drifted off to sleep, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "What if they're not?" As the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Jack. It was like living with a stranger, a familiar face hiding unfamiliar secrets. The more I tried to rationalize his behavior, the more my doubts grew. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I noticed Jack's dress shirt from the day before crumpled on the floor. As I picked it up to toss it in the laundry basket, a faint scent caught my attention. It wasn't my perfume. My heart raced as I brought the collar closer to my nose. The scent was floral, unfamiliar, and unmistakably feminine. "It's probably just from hugging a colleague," I muttered to myself, trying to quell the rising panic. But the knot in my stomach tightened. That evening, I decided to broach the subject over dinner. "So, how's that big case going?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Jack's fork paused midway to his mouth. "Oh, same old, he replied, not meeting my eyes. "It must be pretty intense if you're working so late every night," I pressed. He shrugged, suddenly very interested in his plate. "Yeah, it's a tough one. But let's not talk about work. How was your day?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and demand answers. Instead, I smiled and told him about a mundane meeting I'd had that afternoon. The next day, I ran into my friend Lisa at the grocery store. "Olivia," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. "I haven't seen you in ages. How are you and Jack doing?" "We're good," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just busy with work. You know how it is." Lisa's face fell slightly. "Oh, I thought, never mind." "What?" I asked, my heart speeding up. She hesitated. "It's probably nothing, but I saw Jack at that new bar downtown last week. He was with some woman I didn't recognize. I assumed you knew." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped my shopping cart for support. "Oh, yeah," I heard myself say, as if from a great distance. "Probably a work colleague. Thanks for letting me know, Lisa." I somehow made it through the rest of the conversation and got home, my mind reeling. A work colleague at a bar. At night? When he told me he was working late at the office? That night, when Jack came home, I watched him closely. He seemed distracted, checking his phone more often than usual. When it buzzed with a message, he quickly turned it face down on the table. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, just work stuff," he mumbled, not looking up. I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly for there to be a reasonable explanation for everything. But the doubt was eating away at me, growing larger with each passing day. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to check Jack's phone while he was in the shower. I'd never done anything like this before, and my hands shook as I picked it up. It was locked, of course. I tried his birthday. Nothing. Our anniversary. Nothing. Just as I was about to give up, I had a hunch and tried my birthday. The phone unlocked. With a racing heart, I opened his messages. There, at the top, was a conversation with someone named A. My breath caught as I read the most recent message. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place, same time. X." I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back, my mind spinning. Who was A? What did this mean? When Jack came out of the bathroom, I tried to act normal, but my hands were shaking as I poured my coffee. "Any plans for tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, you know, probably working late again," he said, not meeting my eyes. "And this case is really demanding." I nodded, feeling sick to my stomach. He was lying right to my face. That day at work, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept replaying all the little moments, all the signs I'd ignored or explained away. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden work trips that came up out of nowhere. By the time I got home that evening, I was a mess of emotions. Hurt, anger, confusion, and fear swirling together into a toxic cocktail. I paced around our living room, debating what to do. Should I confront him, follow him, pretend I didn't know and hope it was all a misunderstanding? As I stood there, staring at our wedding photo on the mantle, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd call. "Hello?" I said when the person on the other end picked up. I need to hire a private investigator." As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. One way or another, I was going to get answers. But was I really prepared for what those answers might be? The next morning, I met with the private investigator in a small coffee shop across town. His name was Mike, and he looked nothing like the trench coat wearing, cigarette smoking detectives you see in movies. He was just a regular looking guy in jeans and a polo shirt. "So, Mrs. Thompson," he said, sipping his coffee, "tell me what's going on." I took a deep breath and spilled everything. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the mysterious text messages. As I talked, Mike nodded and took notes. "All right," he said when I finished. "Here's what we're going to do. I'll tail your husband for a week, document his movements, take photos if necessary. At the end of the week, we'll meet again, and I'll give you my report." "Sound good?" I nodded, my throat tight. This was really happening. As I left the coffee shop, I felt like I was in a daze. Part of me couldn't believe I was actually doing this, hiring someone to spy on my own husband. But the other part of me, the part that was tired of the lies and the suspicion, knew it was necessary. The next week was torture. Every time Jack said he was working late, every time he took a phone call in another room, I wondered what Mike was seeing. Was he watching Jack walk into a bar with another woman? Was he photographing a secret rendezvous? I tried to act normal around Jack, but it was hard. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, he caught me staring at him. "Everything okay, Liv?" he asked, looking concerned. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired. Work's been crazy." He nodded and went back to brushing his teeth. I watched him in the mirror. This man I thought I knew so well. Was he thinking about her right now, wishing he was with her instead of me? The week dragged on. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the constant worry and speculation. My colleague, Sarah, noticed something was off. "Olivia, are you all right?" she asked one day over lunch. "You seem distracted?" I considered telling her everything but decided against it. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just a big misunderstanding? "I'm fine," I lied. "I just got a lot on my plate right now." Finally, the day came for my follow-up meeting with Mike. I sat in the same coffee shop, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. Mike arrived, looking grim. My heart sank. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, sitting down, "I have my report for you." He pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. I stared at it, afraid to touch it. "Before you open that," Mike said softly, I want you to be sure you're ready for what's inside. Once you see these photos, you can't unsee them." I nodded, my mouth dry. "I need to know," I whispered. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photos. The first few were innocuous, Jack leaving his office, Jack getting into his car, but then my heart stopped. There was Jack entering a hotel, and next to him, her hand on his arm, was a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful, tall, blonde, everything I wasn't. The next photo showed them in the hotel bar, leaning close together, laughing at some shared joke. Another showed them entering an elevator together, Jack's hand on the small of her back. I felt like I was going to be sick. "There's more," Mike said gently, "but I think you get the idea." I nodded, unable to speak. He continued, "Her name is Amanda Parker. She's a junior associate at your husband's firm. From what I could gather, they've been seeing each other for at least a month, possibly longer. A month, maybe longer. All those late nights, all those work emergencies. It had all been lies. What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike looked at me sympathetically. "That's not for me to say, Mrs. Thompson, but if you need any further evidence for legal purposes, just let me know." I thanked him, tucked the envelope into my bag, and left the coffee shop in a daze. As I walked home, my mind was racing. Should I confront Jack? Should I wait and gather more evidence? Should I just pack my bags and leave? When I got home, the house was empty. Jack had texted earlier to say he'd be working late again. Another lie. I sat on our bed, the bed we'd shared for 8 years, and pulled out the photos again. As I looked at them, at the evidence of my husband's betrayal, something inside me hardened. The hurt and confusion were still there, but now there was anger too. And beneath the anger, a determination. I'd been lied to, cheated on, made a fool of. But I wasn't going to let this break me. No, I decided as I stared at the photo of Jack and his mistress. I was going to get through this, and I was going to come out stronger on the other side. I picked up my phone and dialed my best friend's number. "Hey," I said when she answered. "Can you come over? I need your help with something." As I waited for her to arrive, I started making plans. Jack had no idea what was coming. My best friend, Rachel, arrived within the hour. One look at my face and she knew something was seriously wrong. "Olivia, what's going on?" she asked, concern etched across her features. I wordlessly handed her the envelope of photos. As she flipped through them, her eyes widened. "Oh, Liv," she breathed. "Ed, I'm so sorry." We spent the next few hours talking, crying, and strategizing. Rachel was all for confronting Jack immediately, but I wasn't sure. "What if it's not what it looks like?" I found myself saying. even as I knew how ridiculous that sounded. "Olivia," Rachel said gently, "you hired a private investigator. You have photos of him entering a hotel with another woman. What more proof do you need?" She was right, of course. But part of me still clung to the hope that there was an explanation, that my marriage wasn't really over. The next day, I decided to do some investigating of my own. While Jack was at work, I went through his things. I found receipts for dinners at expensive restaurants on nights he told me he was working late. There was a credit card statement with charges for jewelry I'd never received. But then, just as I was about to close his dresser drawer, I found something that made me pause. It was a brochure for a couple's retreat. The dates circled on it were for next month, around our anniversary. My head spun. Why would he be planning a couple's retreat if he was having an affair? Maybe I jumped to conclusions. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything. That evening, when Jack came home, I decided to test the waters. "Hey," I said casually, I was thinking we should do something special for our anniversary next month. Any ideas?" Jack looked surprised, then a bit flustered. "Oh, yeah. I've actually been thinking about that too. But let's talk about it later, okay? I'm beat." I watched him closely as he avoided my gaze. Was that guilt in his eyes, or just tiredness? The next day, I decided to swing by Jack's office unannounced. As I approached his floor, my heart was pounding. What if I ran into her? I don't know what I expected to find, but I felt like I had to do something. I walked into the lobby, my eyes scanning for any sign of Jack or the woman from the photos. Nothing. I was about to leave when I overheard a conversation at the front desk. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, your usual room is available for next week," the receptionist was saying. My blood ran cold. I ducked behind a pillar, my heart racing. "Great," I heard Jack's voice reply. "And you have the champagne and roses arranged." "Of course, sir, everything will be just as you requested." I felt like I was going to be sick. Champagne? Roses? This wasn't just a casual fling. This was romantic. I stumbled out of the hotel, barely making it to my car before the tears started. All my doubts, all my hopes for an innocent explanation came crashing down around me. When I got home, I called Rachel. "You were right," I sobbed into the phone. "He's definitely cheating." Rachel came over immediately. As we sat on my couch, a bottle of wine between us, she asked, "So what are you going to do now?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront him, to scream and yell and throw things. But another part—" "What?" Rachel prompted. "Another part of me wants to make him suffer," I admitted. "To let him think he's getting away with it, and then pull the rug out from under him when he least expects it." Rachel nodded slowly. "Well, if that's what you want to do, I'm with you all the way. But Liv, are you sure you can handle keeping up the act? Pretending everything's okay when you know it's not?" I thought about it. Could I? Could I look Jack in the eye, knowing what I knew, and pretend everything was fine? The idea made me feel sick, but also powerful. For once, I'd be the one in control. "I can do it," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "I can do it, and I'll make him regret ever thinking he could fool me." Rachel squeezed my hand. "Okay, then, let's make a plan." As we started plotting, I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, hurt, betrayal, but also a growing sense of determination. Jack had underestimated me. He thought he could have his cake and eat it too, juggling a wife and a mistress without consequences. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I might be down, but I was far from out. And when I was done, Jack wouldn't know what hit him. Little did I know, the roller coaster was just beginning. The path ahead would be filled with more twists and turns than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound determination. If Jack wanted to play games, I could play too, and I was going to win. I started by doing what I do best: research. I spent hours online looking up everything I could about infidelity, divorce laws, and how to gather evidence. I even found some forums for women in similar situations. Their stories were heartbreaking, but also inspiring. So many of them had come out stronger on the other side. One post, in particular, caught my eye. A woman described how she'd used a hidden camera to catch her husband in the act. It felt invasive, but wasn't what Jack was doing far worse. I mulled it over for a day before making my decision. That afternoon, I went to an electronics store and bought a small, inconspicuous camera. The salesperson gave me a knowing look as he rang it up, but I didn't care. I was beyond shame at this point. When I got home, I carefully placed the camera in our bedroom, angling it towards the bed. The thought of what I might see made me sick, but I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. That night, when Jack came home, I greeted him with a smile and a kiss. "How was your day, honey?" I asked, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He seemed surprised by my cheerfulness. Good. Busy, you know how it is." I nodded sympathetically. "Well, I made your favorite for dinner. Thought you could use a treat after all your hard work." As we ate, I watched him closely. Was he thinking about her? Comparing me to her? The thoughts made my blood boil, but I kept my face neutral. After dinner, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then quickly turned it face down. "Work," he muttered. "On a Friday night?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He shrugged. "Big case. You know how it is." I nodded, biting back the words I really wanted to say. Instead, I smiled and said, "Well, don't work too hard. Maybe we could do something fun this weekend." "Yeah, maybe," he said noncommittally. "We'll see how things go." The next day, while Jack was supposedly at the office, I decided to take things a step further. I remembered the woman from the photos, Amanda Parker, the junior associate. With a bit of digging online, I found her social media profiles. My heart clenched as I scrolled through her photos. She was beautiful, young, carefree. Everything I used to be before life happened. But as I dug deeper, I started to notice things. Little inconsistencies in her posts. Vague references to a special someone that started around the time Jack's behavior changed. And then, buried in her feed from months ago, a photo that made my blood run cold. It was a group shot from some work event, and there, in the background, were Jack and Amanda standing far too close for mere colleagues. The date on the post was from over 6 months ago. 6 months. This had been going on for at least 6 months. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those nights I'd spent alone, thinking Jack was working hard to provide for our future. All those times I'd defended him to friends and family when they commented on his absence. It had all been a lie. Fury bubbled up inside me. I wanted to confront him right then and there, to call him and scream at him for throwing away our marriage. But I held back. I needed more. I needed to be smart about this. I spent the rest of the day combing through Amanda's social media, taking screenshots of anything that might be useful. Then I turned my attention to Jack's accounts. He'd always been private online, but now I saw it for what it was, a way to hide his double life. As I was scrolling through his LinkedIn, something caught my eye. A recommendation from a client praising Jack for his work on a case. The date coincided with one of his work trips. A trip he'd told me was to a conference in another city. My hands shaking, I picked up my phone and called the client's office. "Hello," I said, putting on my best professional voice. "I'm calling to verify some information about a case Jack Thompson worked on for you last month." The receptionist was helpful, confirming that yes, Jack had been in their office for several days working on the case. In this city, not at a conference hundreds of miles away. Another lie exposed. By the time Jack came home that evening, I was a mess of emotions. Anger, hurt, betrayal, they all swirled together, threatening to overwhelm me. But I held it together. I had to. "Hey," Jack said as he walked in. "Sorry I'm late. Work was crazy." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He didn't seem to notice my silence, too engrossed in his phone. "I'm beat," he said after a while. "Think I'm going to turn in early." As he headed upstairs, I thought about the camera waiting in our bedroom. Part of me hoped it wouldn't catch anything, that despite all the evidence, there was still some innocent explanation for everything. But a larger part of me knew better. Jack was cheating, had been cheating for months. And now, finally, I was going to have the proof I needed to confront him. As I heard the shower turn on upstairs, I steeled myself for what was to come. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Every time Jack's phone buzzed, my heart raced. Every time he said he was working late, I wondered if he was really with her. The not knowing was driving me crazy. I threw myself into gathering more evidence. I set up a hidden app on Jack's phone that would track his location and record his calls. It felt wrong, invasive, but I kept reminding myself that he was the one who had betrayed our marriage. One afternoon, while Jack was at work, I decided to check the footage from the hidden camera. My hands were shaking as I connected it to my laptop. Part of me still hoped it would show nothing, that this was all a big misunderstanding. But as the video started playing, my heart sank. There was Jack in our bedroom, on the phone. "I miss you too, baby," he was saying, his voice soft and tender in a way it hadn't been with me in months. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I've got a surprise planned." I felt sick, hearing him talk to her like that, in our home, in our bedroom. It was almost too much to bear, but I forced myself to keep watching. I needed to know everything. The next day, I followed Jack. I told myself it was to gather more evidence. But deep down, I think I just needed to see it with my own eyes. I watched from my car as he left his office early, bouquet of flowers in hand. My heart clenched as I realized they were lilies, my favorite flower. He used to bring them home for me all the time when we first got married. I followed him to a small cafe downtown, and there she was, Amanda, beautiful, young, smiling widely as Jack approached. He handed her the flowers and kissed her, right there in public, not caring who might see. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm over there and confront them both, but I held back. My knuckles white on the steering wheel as I watched them sit down and order coffee. They looked happy, carefree, like a normal couple enjoying each other's company. It hit me then that this wasn't just a fling or a one-time mistake. This was a full-blown relationship. I don't know how long I sat there watching them through the cafe window. Eventually, they got up to leave. Jack put his arm around Amanda's waist as they walked out, pulling her close in a way he hadn't done with me in years. I followed them to a nearby hotel. As they disappeared inside, I felt something inside me break. This was really happening. My husband was cheating on me, right now, just a few hundred feet away. I sat in my car for hours, alternating between crying and seething with rage. When Jack finally emerged, looking disheveled and guilty, I wanted nothing more than to confront him right then and there. But I held back. I wasn't ready yet. I needed more. Over the next week, I gathered more evidence. I recorded phone calls where Jack told me he was working late, only to hear him making plans with Amanda minutes later. I took screenshots of text messages where he professed his love for her. I even managed to get copies of hotel receipts from his credit card statements. Each new piece of evidence was like a knife to my heart, but it also fueled my determination. I was going to make Jack pay for every lie, every betrayal. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then quickly put it face down on the nightstand. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, just work stuff," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. I nodded, biting back the words I really wanted to say. Instead, I asked, "So, any plans for the weekend? I was thinking we could maybe go away somewhere. Just the two of us." Jack looked uncomfortable. I don't know if I can get away. This case is really heating up, you know?" I forced a smile. "Of course. Maybe another time." As Jack drifted off to sleep beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. I had all the evidence I needed now, more than enough to confront him, to end this farce of a marriage. But something held me back. A small, irrational part of me still hoped for an explanation, still wanted to believe in the man I had married 8 years ago. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to give Jack one last chance to come clean, one opportunity to tell me the truth before I blew his world apart. I spent the day preparing. I cooked Jack's favorite meal, set the table with our best china, even put on the dress he had always loved on me. When Jack came home that evening, he looked surprised. "What's all this?" he asked. I smiled, my heart pounding. I just thought we could use a nice dinner together. We've both been so busy lately. As we ate, I watched Jack closely. He seemed distracted, checking his phone every few minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Jack," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "is there anything you want to tell me, anything at all?" He looked up, startled. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Fear? But then it was gone, replaced by his usual mask of indifference. "No," he said, turning back to his meal. "Nothing I can think of." "Why?" And just like that, my last shred of hope vanished. Jack had looked me in the eye and lied. Again. I nodded, fighting back tears. "No reason," I managed to say when just checking. As Jack went back to his dinner, oblivious to the storm raging inside me, I made my final decision. Tomorrow, I would confront him. Tomorrow. I would end this charade once and for all. Little did I know, tomorrow would bring revelations I never could have prepared for. I woke up early the next morning, my stomach in knots. Today was the day. The day I would confront Jack and end this charade once and for all. I watched Jack get ready for work, acting as if everything was normal. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, and walked out the door. The lies made me sick to my stomach. As soon as he left, I sprang into action. I gathered all the evidence I had collected, the photos, the credit card statements, the hotel receipts, everything. I laid it all out on the dining room table, a damning display of Jack's betrayal. Then I waited. Around noon, I sent Jack a text. "We need to talk, come home as soon as you can." His response came quickly. "Everything okay?" I almost laughed at the irony. "Just come home," I replied. An hour later, I heard his key in the lock. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Jack walked in, looking concerned. "Liv, what's going on?" I stood at the end of the dining room table, my arms crossed. "Sit down, Jack," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He hesitated, then took a seat. His eyes widened as he saw the array of papers and photos spread out before him. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice tight. I took a deep breath. "This is the evidence of your affair with Amanda Parker." The color drained from Jack's face. "Liv, I can explain." "Explain?" I cut him off. "Explain what, Jack? Explain how you've been lying to me for months. Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back, betraying our marriage." I picked up one of the photos and slammed it down in front of him. It showed him and Amanda entering the hotel. "Explain this, Jack. Explain how this is just work stuff." Jack's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like a fish out of water. "I know everything," I continued, my voice rising. "I know about the dinners, the hotel rooms, the gifts. I know you've been seeing her for at least 6 months. I know you lied about your business trips, your late nights at the office." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. All the hurt, all the anger I had been holding back came pouring out. "Do you have any idea what this has done to me? Do you even care? I trusted you, Jack. I loved you, and this is how you repay me." Jack finally found his voice. "Olivia, please, let me explain. It's not what you think." "Not what I think," I laughed bitterly. "So you're not having an affair with Amanda? These photos are what, photoshopped?" The hotel receipts are fake? Jack stood up, reaching for me. Liv, please, just listen to me. I stepped back out of his reach. No, you listen to me, Jack. I've done nothing but listen to your lies for months. Now it's your turn to listen. I picked up another photo, this one showing Jack and Amanda kissing in the cafe. I saw you with her. I heard you on the phone with her. In our bedroom, Jack. In our home. Jack's face crumpled. He sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry, I repeated incredulously. You're sorry. Sorry you cheated, or sorry you got caught. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Both. Liv, I never meant for this to happen. It just did. Things like this don't just happen, Jack, I spat. You made choices. Every lie, every secret meeting, every night you spent with her instead of me. Those were all choices you made. Jack nodded miserably. You're right. I don't know what to say. I love you, Liv. I never stopped loving you. His words, which once would have melted my heart, now felt like a slap in the face. If this is how you treat someone you love, I'd hate to see how you treat your enemies. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say next. I want a divorce, Jack. His head snapped up. What? No, Liv, please. We can work this out. I'll end things with Amanda. I'll go to counseling. Anything you want. Please don't give up on us. I shook my head, and I'm not the one who gave up on us, Jack. You did that the moment you decided to cheat. Please, he begged, tears in his eyes. I'll do anything. I love you, Liv. You're my wife. For a moment, I felt my resolve weaken. This was the man I had loved for years, the man I had built a life with. But then I remembered all the lies, all the betrayal, and my heart hardened again. No, Jack. It's over. I've already contacted a lawyer. You'll be hearing from them soon. Jack stood up, reaching for me again. Olivia, please, just give me one more chance. I'll prove to you how much I love you. I stepped back, shaking my head. You had chances, Jack. Every day for the past 6 months, you had the chance to tell me the truth, to end things with Amanda, to choose our marriage, and every day, you chose her instead. I picked up the stack of evidence and handed it to him. Aitha, here, you can have this. I have copies of everything. Jack took the papers numbly, staring at them as if he couldn't believe this was happening. I want you out of the house by tonight, I said, my voice cold. You can stay with your girlfriend or at a hotel. I don't care. Just go. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jack standing there, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I finally let myself break down. The sobs I had been holding back came in waves, racking my body. It was over. My marriage, my life as I knew it, it was all over. But as I cried, a small part of me felt relieved. The lies were over, the suspicion, the doubt, the constant anxiety. It was all out in the open now. And somewhere, beneath the pain and the heartbreak, I felt something else stirring. Something that felt a lot like hope. I spent the next few days in a daze. After Jack left, I alternated between bouts of uncontrollable crying and periods of numb disbelief. How had my life come to this? My best friend, Rachel, came over as soon as I called her. She held me as I sobbed, murmuring words of comfort that I barely heard. What am I going to do now? I asked her, my voice hoarse from crying. Rachel squeezed my hand. You're going to survive this, Liv. You're stronger than you know. But I didn't feel strong. I felt broken, used, discarded. Every happy memory with Jack now felt tainted, poisoned by his betrayal. Had any of it been real? Had he ever truly loved me? The doubts and questions swirled in my mind, keeping me up at night. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship. Were there signs I'd missed? Could I have prevented this somehow? One morning, about a week after the confrontation, I woke up and couldn't get out of bed. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the loss, the uncertainty of my future, felt crushing. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done before. My boss, sensing something was wrong, told me to take as much time as I needed. Days blurred together. I barely ate, barely slept. Rachel would come by, forcing me to eat something, trying to get me to talk. But I had nothing to say. What was there to say when your entire world had been shattered? Jack tried to call and text multiple times, but I ignored him. What could he possibly say to make this better? One day, as I was mindlessly scrolling through social media, I came across a photo of Amanda. She was smiling, carefree, probably uploaded long before our confrontation. The sight of her face sent a jolt of pain through me. Without thinking, I started comparing myself to her. She was younger, prettier, probably more exciting. No wonder Jack had chosen her. These thoughts sent me into a spiral of self-doubt and depression. I felt old, used up, unlovable. Who would want me now? I started having panic attacks. The smallest things would set them off. A song on the radio that reminded me of Jack. The sight of a happy couple walking down the street. Even the smell of Jack's favorite coffee at the local cafe. During one particularly bad episode, I found myself gasping for air, convinced I was dying. Rachel, who had been staying with me, called an ambulance. At the hospital, a kind-faced doctor sat with me. "You're experiencing severe anxiety and depression," she explained gently. "It's not uncommon after a traumatic event like this." She prescribed some medication and recommended therapy. I nodded numbly, not really hearing her. How had I become this person? This weak, pathetic shell of a woman. The next few weeks were a blur of therapy sessions and medication adjustments. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, was patient and understanding. She assured me that my feelings were normal, that healing takes time. "You've experienced a significant betrayal," she told me during one session. "It's natural to feel lost and unsure right now." But I was tired of feeling this way, tired of crying, tired of doubting myself, tired of letting Jack's actions control my life. One day, as I was leaving my therapy session, I ran into an old college friend, Sarah. I barely recognized her. She looked amazing, confident, and put together. "Olivia," she exclaimed, "is that you? My God, it's been years." I tried to smile, but I'm sure it came out more like a grimace. "Hey, Sarah. Yeah, it's been a while." Sarah's smile faded as she took in my appearance. I knew I looked awful. I'd lost weight, had dark circles under my eyes, and couldn't remember the last time I'd done anything with my hair. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. And suddenly, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Right there in the middle of the sidewalk, I broke down and told her everything. About Jack, about the affair, about how lost I felt. To my surprise, Sarah nodded in understanding. "I've been there," she said softly, "and my ex-husband cheated on me too." I looked at her in shock. This confident, beautiful woman had gone through the same thing. How did you get through it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah smiled, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but I realized that his actions were about him, not me. I refused to let his mistakes define me." She told me about how she'd thrown herself into her work, started working out, traveled. "I rebuilt myself," she said, "stronger, better than before." As I listened to Sarah, I felt something stir inside me, a tiny spark of hope, determination. I wasn't sure, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. We exchanged numbers, and Sarah promised to check in on me. As I watched her walk away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, envy at her obvious happiness and success, but also a glimmer of possibility. If she could do it, maybe I could too. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Sarah's words, about rebuilding myself, about not letting Jack's actions define me. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future without Jack. It was scary, uncertain, but also exciting. The thought surprised me. I got up and walked to the mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in weeks. The woman staring back at me looked tired, worn. But as I gazed into my own eyes, I saw something else too. A flicker of the strong, confident woman I used to be. The woman I could be again. In that moment, I made a decision. I was done being a victim. Done letting Jack's betrayal control my life. It was time to take back control. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet. The road ahead seemed long and daunting, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. As I crawled back into bed, I made a promise to myself. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would start rebuilding. Tomorrow, I would take the first step towards becoming the woman I wanted to be. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. I got out of bed, took a long shower, and actually bothered to do my hair and makeup. It was a small step, but it felt significant. As I was making coffee, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah, checking in as she'd promised. "Hey, want to grab lunch today?" Her message read. I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Sure, that sounds great." We met at a little cafe downtown. As I walked in, I saw Sarah waving from a corner table. She looked just as put together as she had the day before, and I felt a twinge of self-consciousness. "Olivia!" she exclaimed as I sat down. "You look great." I knew she was just being kind, but her words gave me a small boost of confidence. Over lunch, Sarah told me more about her own journey after her divorce. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "There were days I didn't think I'd make it, but each day, I tried to do one thing to make myself feel better. Sometimes it was as simple as taking a walk or calling a friend." I nodded, taking in her words. "How did you deal with the anger?" I asked. "I'm so angry at Jack, at Amanda, even at myself for not seeing it sooner." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The anger is normal," she said, "but don't let it consume you. Use it as fuel to better yourself instead." As we were finishing up, Sarah hesitated, then said, "Listen, I hope this isn't overstepping, but there's a support group I used to go to for women who've been through similar situations. Would you be interested in coming to a meeting?" My first instinct was to say no. The thought of sharing my pain with strangers terrified me. But then I remembered my promise to myself, to try, to rebuild. "Okay," I said, surprising myself. "I'll give it a try." The next evening, I found myself in a community center, surrounded by women of all ages. As I listened to their stories, I was struck by how similar they were to mine. The betrayal, the pain, the struggle to move forward. It was all so familiar. When it was my turn to speak, I hesitated, but then I took a deep breath and started talking. I told them about Jack, about the affair, about my struggle to find myself again. To my surprise, talking about it helped. These women understood in a way that even Rachel, as supportive as she'd been, couldn't. They'd lived it too. After the meeting, a woman named Maria approached me. "Your story really resonated with me," she said. "I went through something similar last year." We ended up talking for almost an hour. Maria told me how she'd thrown herself into her work after her divorce, eventually starting her own business. "I needed something that was just mine," she explained. "Something he couldn't touch or taint with his betrayal." Her words stuck with me. The next day, I went back to work for the first time in weeks. My colleagues were supportive, tiptoeing around me like I was made of glass. But as I dove back into my projects, I felt a spark of my old passion returning. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a new routine: work, therapy, support group meetings. Slowly, I started to feel more like myself again. One day, as I was leaving the office, my boss called me into her office. "Olivia," she said, "I've been impressed with your work since you've been back. There's a big project coming up, and I'd like you to lead it." I was stunned. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I mean, with everything that's been going on." She waved off my concerns. "You've proven you can handle it. This could be a big opportunity for you." As I left her office, my mind was racing. This project could be just what I needed, a chance to prove to myself that I was still capable, still valuable. That night, I called Rachel to share the news. "That's amazing, Liv," she exclaimed. "You're going to knock it out of the park." As we talked, I realized something. For the first time in months, I'd gone a whole day without thinking about Jack. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was moving on, slowly, painfully, but I was doing it. The next few months were a whirlwind. I threw myself into the project at work, pulling long hours and pushing myself harder than I ever had before. It was exhausting, but exhilarating too. In my personal life, I started making changes too. I joined a gym, started eating healthier. I even signed up for a cooking class. Something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for when I was with Jack. One Saturday, as I was leaving my cooking class, I quite literally ran into someone. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, looking up to see a pair of kind brown eyes. "No worries," the man said with a smile. "I'm Tom, by the way." We ended up chatting for a few minutes. Tom was funny and charming, and for a brief moment, I felt a flutter of something. It wasn't attraction, not really, but it was the possibility of attraction, the knowledge that someday, when I was ready, I could feel that way again. As I walked home, I felt lighter than I had in months. I wasn't ready for a relationship, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I could see a future where I might be. That night, I sat on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. I thought about how far I'd come in the past few months. The pain wasn't gone. I didn't think it ever would be completely, but it had dulled, become more manageable. I thought about Jack, about the life we'd had together. For the first time, I was able to remember the good times without feeling like my heart was being ripped out. They were part of my past, but they didn't define my future. As I sat there, I made another promise to myself. I would keep moving forward, keep growing, keep challenging myself. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to face it, not as Jack's ex-wife, not as a victim of betrayal, but as me. Olivia, strong, resilient, and ready for whatever came next. The road ahead would still have its challenges, I knew, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would lead.